Okay, and welcome to another video from me, Cool Dude Clem, or the Music Wizard as some of you might know me. And I'm talking too fast, like I always do. Anyway, in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to make your music sound better when it comes to guitars and drums. Now, you will need to download my sample pack, because we will be using round robins. A lot of my samples have round robins. Round robins make everything sound so much better, and me being the genius that I am, have come up with a way of using round robins in tracker modules. But I know what you're asking, what the hell is a round robin? I'll put it simply, it's multiple recordings of the same note being played or the same drum being hit. There you go. Okay, I've turned my microphone down a little bit because it was peaking too much. So anyway, like I was saying, we've got 4 samples of a snare drum here. But why would you want to do this? Well, if you play the same note over and over again, or play the same drum over and over again, you're going to hear a very slight difference in the sound. It's going to sound the same overall, but there will be a little subtle difference there, and that's what the round robins try to emulate. And each of these separate samples is a round robin. So anyway, with our snare drum here, if I play a simple drum rhythm that just uses the same snare drum sample over and over again, as you can hear, it sounds very robotic, it sounds very artificial, it doesn't really sound all that good. But if we use a random sample each time the snare drum is supposed to play, much better. Sounds a lot more natural. I'm going to show you a few more examples of round robins in a minute, but first let's just see how I did this. So, if we take a look at the sample map, you can see that the first sample is mapped to C5, the second sample is mapped to C#5, and so on. And when we take a look at the pattern manager, you can see that I've randomly put in C, C#, D, and D#, which all play the corresponding snare drum samples. Anyway, we're not just limited to drum samples with this method, we can do pretty much anything. So, in my sample pack, I have a lot of guitar chords that have round robins done this way, and in the pattern editor here, I've made up a little something using guitar chord samples, and although these do have round robins, I'm only going to be using one sample of each chord just to give you a typical demonstration of what sequenced music usually sounds like, because in most sequenced music, they only think one sample of each note or one sample of each chord is enough. And I mean like professional musicians here, like what you hear on the radio. So you get something that sounds like this. Sounds pretty bad, doesn't it? And you know what? Some artists, mainly hip-hop artists, if you can call them artists that is, think even that's too much. They just take one sample of an instrument and pitch it up or down to make new notes, which makes it sound even more fake. I mean, you might just as well be using an old Amiga and Pro Tracker. Okay, I don't know where that rant came from, but anyway, getting back to the subject in question here. Anyway, one reason why this sounds so bad is because unlike a real guitar where it just sort of smoothly transitions to the next drum, here it just cuts the sound clean off. So what we can do is, if we go to the new note action and select note fade with a fade out of about 8000, it will be a lot more seamless and we'll get something that sounds like this. Still sounds a little bit robotic, but it sounds a lot better than it did. I mean, let's just compare those two right now so you can hear the difference. Right, now it's time to make some real noise. Let's put this through an amp simulator and hear how it sounds. Well, it's sounding more like, what I'm trying to get, It's got that gritty, raucous rock sound to it, but it's not really sounding, real. And I can't, express myself if it don't sound real enough. In other words, it still sounds rather robotic. So let's use our old friend round robins. Much better. Yes, these power chords have round robins and they work in exactly the same way that the ones on the drums do. The first sample of each power chord is mapped to C, the next sample of each power chord is mapped to C sharp, and so on and so on. Finally, let's add some drums to this. I've made a simple drum loop sample. So let's put that in along with the guitar chords and hear how it sounds. Okay, something doesn't quite sound right. It's all at the right tempo. The guitars aren't drowning out the drums or vice versa, but something still doesn't sound quite right. The problem is, the guitar chords have a sort of attack to them. Technically it's not actually an attack, but it can be thought of as such, and it sort of makes the guitar sound like it's lagging behind when something else is playing along with it. So if we put a small delay on everything except the guitar, now it sounds like the guitarist isn't more drunk than usual. But delaying everything else except the guitar is a little bit of a hassle. So what if we made the guitar play slightly earlier than everything else? This is more like what would happen in a real band, and like the previous fix, it makes it sound like the guitar is not lagging behind the drums, or anything else come to that matter. It's a lot simpler, and we get a result like this. The one thing to remember is that the delay must be set to whatever the song's speed is minus 1. So in this case the song's speed is 6, so we set the delay to 5 and you're good to go. Okay, so in this last part what we're going to try and do is make a realistic guitar tune, and I've adjusted my microphone again because I do tend to talk rather loud when I'm doing these things. So hopefully my voice will be a little bit more bearable and it won't have all that noise in it. And hopefully I won't feel like killing myself when I'm editing this, because I absolutely hate listening to my voice when I'm editing videos. Now we're going to try and make something that sounds realistic, but I think I should point out that no matter how good your samples are or what kind of techniques you use, you're never gonna get a sampled guitar to sound real. I mean, you can come pretty close, but it's never gonna sound like the real McCoy. So let's see what we can do here. So I've loaded up one of the guitars from my sample pack, and you might have noticed that a lot of the guitars have notes that play 3 times, and you might be a little bit confused by that. You might be wondering why I've done it that way. Well, the thing is, I wanted to have round robins on the lead guitars as well, but if I was to put those on different samples it would make things a lot more complicated, so what I decided to do is put them on the same sample and use offsets in order to get to each one individually. So we've got one at the beginning of the sample, and at the 028 offset there's another one, and the third one is at the 056 offset, and that's basically how it works. With the bass guitar samples it's a little different. Still done the same way, but the offsets are 014 and 028 instead, which is just something to keep in mind. But anyway, if we go into the pattern manager, I've got a little jazz riff here which I've made, and I'm only going to be using one note from each sample. So if we play that, you can hear it sounds pretty sequenced, but you know, what do you expect? So what we're going to do is we're going to try to make this sound a little better. So first we're going to try and put some stops in. Well, we're not going to try and put some stops in, we will put some stops in. So all we need to do is, when the note needs to be stopped, we play the same note again, but at a very low volume and for a very short time. So if I set the volume to say 16 and use the note cut like you can see what I've done here, and we play that, you can hear that sounds pretty good. Sounds a lot like a string being stopped. But we're not going to stop there. So let's see what this sounds like if we add round robins. Well, that's sounding a lot better, and you can see in the pattern editor that I've randomly put in 056 and 028 to get all the round robins. And this is usually where I would call it a day, but I'm going to go the extra mile here. So one thing you've got to remember with guitars is that not every note is played on the same string. The guitarist is going to switch strings several times to get to different notes. So what I've done here is that in every place where that's likely to happen, I've put in a small stop, but instead of using note cut, I've used note delay. And to make this work, I have to set the note delay to what the song's speed is, -1. So in this case the song's speed is 6, so I set the delay to 5, and if we play that, okay, now that may sound alright for a robot playing a guitar, but when a human plays a guitar, there are always all kinds of little subtle mistakes that really give the sound character. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and simulate this. We're going to try to add string buzz, pinch squeals and overlaps, all without using any additional samples. Of course it's not going to sound 100% genuine, but it will come pretty close. And as usual, here is one I prepared earlier. So let's see how I did it. Okay, for the string buzz, I made a copy of the guitar sound, still using the same samples, but I've added a volume envelope to it, which is just a brief ramp up and ramp down, although you cannot really see it there, but trust me, it's there. So what I do now is I put in the note that's currently playing, but I put it on a fresh channel, make it 1 octave higher at a low volume, and the instrument that I use is the copy of the guitar that now has the volume envelope on it. And we get a pretty good string buzz-like effect. Now for the pinch squeals, it's pretty much done the same way that the stops are done, except instead of playing the same note, I play a high note. And somewhere usually around G6 works well. I usually just put them in randomly in between notes, and if it sounds good I leave them in, if it sounds bad I take them out. But it's best to use this rather sparingly or it's gonna sound rather goofy. And finally there's the overlaps where the next note plays but the previous note hasn't stopped, so they overlap for a very short time. Now this is most likely to happen during a string switch. I don't know what the actual word for it is, so I call it a string switch. And this is something that you frequently hear in rock music, so if that's the kind of sound you're going for, you're going to want to put a lot of those in. And this is how I've done it here. My voice is kind of giving out now, so I'm going to have to stop, but I must have done 50, maybe 60 takes of this, and I keep forgetting things while I'm trying to explain it all. So that's why my voice is giving out, so yeah, I've got to go now. So until next time, goodbye.